Before Richard came, the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank was a well-respected bank, one of 12. Today, District 11, Dallas, is a thought leader. People want to know what Richard Fisher thinks.
Texas is the most powerful economic force in America. This is where jobs are created. This is where the example is set, the Texification of America.
Richard is an only in America story. His parents were immigrants.
My father was homeless and a beggar, and actually was sentenced to prison at the age of 5 years and 2 months for 7 years for begging for food. But then they took mercy on him and released him after a short period, and then he lived in the streets till he was about 19. And then he escaped, and he eventually made his way to the promised land, which is this great country of ours.
Richard went to grades 1 through 5 in the Mexican school system. Somebody discovered him and realized the potential he had. He ended up with a scholarship to a high school that led to a scholarship to the Naval Academy, which led to a scholarship at Harvard, which then led to Oxford, and then led to Stanford for an MBA.
My dad would say, look, we went from no education to too much in one generation, so get a job, go to work.
Richard Fisher is truly a Renaissance man. He brings a breadth of interest which has caused him to focus on long-range economic issues, perhaps more than you normally would expect from a regional bank president.
The Federal Reserve has faced enormous challenges, and Richard has made important contributions to our work and to sound economic policy more generally, bringing a deep knowledge of financial markets, of global economic trends, and of the conditions facing businesses and communities here at home.
Well, Rich is an extraordinary leader, and he's also a great ambassador for U.S. monetary policy throughout the world.
He is able to express concepts in ways that are understandable to the layman, but also very enjoyable. You might call it, I guess, humorous erudition on his part.
I referenced Scarlett Johansson as an example of a hot economy. I try to speak in plain English so that my audiences understand. I view my job as translating for the Fed.
He has the skill of translating the sort of intellectual conclusions into operational principles.
Richard does not change his opinions based on who tends to be in office at one moment in time, what the current month's economic indicators suggest. He has strong convictions. You may not agree with his convictions, and that does not necessarily sway what he believes.
The first thing that Alan Greenspan told me when I joined up was, Richard, to speak to the truth. You have a markets background. You're different than everybody else. There are a lot of academics here.
The typical banker surrounds themselves with data, and they make their decisions just on the data they have access to. Richard gets outside of his sphere of influence. He brings something to bear that's unique. He brings his Rolodex with him.
I have a personal survey of some 50 CEOs. I ask them, and it's all done very confidentially, tell me what you're seeing through your eyes, which sometimes gives me a different perspective. I've dissented many times.
Well, he's outspoken, and I'm sure it goes against the grain of some people. I find it refreshing, and he hasn't gone against my grain, so I'm very sympathetic to what he has done.
More than most people realize, the Federal Reserve System is a huge factor in this country's economic success. And being willing to undertake that job, clearly he could have made much, much more money staying in the investment world.
Richard said, in today's society, serving in the Federal Reserve is the purest form of public service.
I hope my legacy is the Dallas Fed, that I did a good job. And I helped expand the footprint and the standing of this great bank in the most important economic region of the world. I hope that I've made a positive impression amongst my peers on the Open Market Committee and within the markets themselves as someone who speaks to the truth. I may have a different view, but is thoughtful and fair. I think that's what I hope my legacy will be.